Hello, in this problem we are given that tangent of theta is -1/2 and cosine of theta is greater than 0, and we have to determine the exact values of other 5 trigonometric functions of theta. From the information that we are given, we know that tangent is negative because of the -1/2 and cosine is positive. So here we have x and y axes. We have all students take calculus. This stands for all trigonometric functions are positive in the first quadrant. Sine and its reciprocal are positive in the second quadrant. Tangent and its reciprocal are positive in the third quadrant, and cosine and its reciprocal are positive in the fourth quadrant. Since we are given that tangent is negative, this means that the angle cannot fall in the first quadrant and the angle cannot fall in the third quadrant because that's where tangent is positive. We are also given that cosine is positive, so the angle cannot fall in the second quadrant because cosine would be negative there. This means that the angle falls in the fourth quadrant. So here's our reference angle. Let's drop a perpendicular to the x-axis and have a reference triangle. The reference angle theta is always with the x-axis. We are given that tangent of theta is -1/2. Tangent is the ratio of opposite side divided by adjacent. So I'm going to label the sides. The opposite of the angle theta is 1 and adjacent side is 2. We are given that tangent of theta is -1/2. So I'm going to look on the x and y axes, and to the right x values are positive, so we have +2, and below the x-axis going down y values are going towards -infinity, so the y values are negative below the x-axis, so the opposite side is equal to -1. Since we have a ratio for tangent of theta, we can calculate cotangent of theta by taking a reciprocal of tangent, which will give us -2/1, and this is cotangent of theta is equal to -2, and this is our solution for cotangent. But in order to find ratios for sine and cosine, we need to calculate the hypotenuse of this right triangle. We have two legs of this right triangle, so we have c² equals to a² plus b², and the hypotenuse squared is equal to one side is -1 to the second plus the second side is 2 to the second. We get c² is equal to -1 times -1, we have a +1, plus 2 times 2, we have a 4. C² is equal to 1 plus 4 is +5. In order to solve for c, we need to do the inverse of squaring, which is a square root, and whatever we do to one side, we need to do the same thing to the other side. Square root and a square will cancel, and we get that c is equal to radical 5. So the hypotenuse of this right triangle is square root of 5. Now we can calculate sine of theta, which is a ratio of opposite side, which is -1, divided by hypotenuse, which is a radical 5. We need to rationalize this sign, but before I do so, let's calculate the reciprocal of sine, which is cosecant of theta. This is equal to the reciprocal of -1 out of radical 5 is radical 5 out of -1. So in order to rationalize sine of theta, we need one more factor of radical 5 in denominator. Whatever we multiply in denominator by, we need to do the same thing to numerator. So times radical 5. This gives us -1 times radical 5. We get negative radical 5 in numerator out of radical 5 to the second power in denominator. Square root and the second power will cancel, and we get that sine of theta is equal to negative radical 5 out of 5. So this is our sine. Cosecant of theta is radical 5 out of -1. This can be simplified since radical 5 divided by -1, we get cosecant of theta is equal to negative radical 5. Cosine of theta is the ratio of adjacent side divided by hypotenuse. The measure of the adjacent side is 2 out of hypotenuse is radical 5. We will need to rationalize this, but before I do so, I'm going to calculate secant of theta, which is the reciprocal of 2 out of radical 5, and the reciprocal of that is radical 5 out of 2. So this is our secant. So to rationalize cosine, we need one more factor of radical 5 in denominator. Whatever we do to denominator, we need to do the same thing to numerator. And we get cosine of theta is 2 radical 5 out of radical 5 to the second power. Square root and the second power will cancel. And we get cosine of theta is equal to 2 radical 5 out of 5. And this is our solution. That's all.